Okay, so Bez Hashem Yisbarach. Now we have to make up a little bit of the time that we lost. Bez Hashem Yisbarach. Try to, Bez Hashem, go through the sugya. It's a very geschmack sugya. The sugya of medicine in halacha, at least as it pertains to Hilchos Brachos. This is a sugya which, for sure, is one of the very, very negay sugyas. Maybe for children, it's certainly a newer shaila. You know, some of us remember growing up that the medicines did not have good taste and certainly did not need a bracha. And today, the medicines have a very good taste and potentially can need a bracha. Just a moment, let me just fix this. Sorry, listen. Potentially can need a bracha. It's a sugya that I hope, Bez Hashem, won't be negay l'maisa, that we won't need to take medicine. Halavai, that'll be a shmira for us and for the whole ganze chabura. The Tosfos in Brachos, that's the starting point. Tosfos in Brachos and Daf Lamed Vav with Aleph. Tosfos says, Dibur Masel Kevan, based on our sugya, Kevan the Isla Hanomi Mei Bruchi. Tosfos tells us that the obvious, if you get hana, that's what we've been learning now for the last couple of weeks. If you get hana, then you have to make a bracha. And who doesn't realize that by now? And a person that's nene ba'olam hazeh, mei olam hazeh b'loi bracha, he's mamish and moyel. The chayr, it's no different. If you get hana, you get make a bracha. The Nir Nadvarim says Tosfos, im odam sheise mashkin, if you drink cod liver oil, im mamashkim royim lishtais leisle anominei, you get no hana, loi by bruchi. Person is eating good old fashioned cod liver oil, he certainly does not have to make a bracha. If you get hana, not the hana's refuah, but if you get some type of a enjoyment of the ingestion itself, says Tosfos, then you need a bracha. L'chayra, we started late today, but we could end early. It seems to be quite simple. If you have medicine like a pill that has no taste, so then it would seem to be no bracha. If you have some type of a cough medicine, does have a geschmack taste, so then it would seem to be that you do need a bracha. Very, very simple. We can close the Gemaras and go home early. There's one shaila that we could don, and this is what it seems to say in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, our siman today is siman reish dalet sifches, and it seems to say kol ha'oichlin b'mashkin she'adam oichel shoysel refuah im taimam toiv, if it tastes good. If you're taking medicine and the medicine tastes good, so then you make a bracha before bracha and after bracha. And that seems to be what the psak halacha is. So it'll come out, somebody's giving a child a cough medicine and it has a good taste. Obviously, it needs a good hechsher. A cough medicine that has a bad hexture could be a shaila of glycerin, it could be a shaila of emesis, mamish, it could be mamish, it could be chalovim, it could be mamish and nisikaris. So the person has to have a good hexture, but it has a good taste. The glycerin has a good taste. If somebody were to eat the medicine, chayra, with a good taste and a good hexture, chayra meat to make a bracha, where's the first halacha? Simin reish dalid sifches. That's the chayra. And the truth is, the only thing that we could clear is what happens if you have a Michael that it's such a common Michael, or it's a Michael that's not such a common Michael to eat, and people eat it purely for refuah reasons, but it is a Michael nonetheless. So this is a Ramah in Sifid Aleph. It says you make a bracha. The Ramah's sheet is you make a shahako. And the Mishabura brings down, and Sivkot Nun Hey, and in the Bir Loch and Simon Reish Beis Aleph, he brings down shitas that say, no, if it comes from a tree, you make a bread for your eights. But again, irrespective, our sig is talking about medicine, which is probably made of all types of chemicals and sugars and whatnot. And it would seem to be clear that the bracha on medicine with a good taste would be a shahako, and that's a chayram. What one's supposed to do. You could clear, sometimes you have a case of where somebody swallows a pill and the pill has some type of a sweet epis coating or something like that. And the chayra there, you could clear it. The chayra, he takes it down and he gets hana, and that we never heard of anybody making a bracha on a pill. So this lamaisa, the goyim Rishleim Zalman, brought in the Shmir Shabbos Hilchos in Perek Mem, in Sif Sadi Zayin. He says that you don't make a bracha on that, but he explains why. He says, he doesn't explain why. He seems to say because it's a swallowing. It seems to be that when one swallows, so then perhaps that's not a maisa achila, perhaps that's shalik a derech achila. Bishlama, when a person takes a piece of chicken, he chews it and then he swallows it, okay? And even if you take the chicken whole, but it's an oichel, when you have a pill, that the only way to eat it is by swallowing it. So such a thing, we can hear such a svara to say that such a thing would not require a bracha, and that's the psak of the poskim. Our sugya abaisai is this lemaisa, what we just said? On a regular cough medicine that has a good taste, you make a bracha, if you not make a bracha, what's the halacha lemaisa? I'm going to start from the top. The emes is, it is a very interesting Ramah in our sif. Shulchan Aruch says that when a person takes medicine based on taisvis, it has a good taste, you should make a bracha. Says the Ramah, an interesting halacha, which at first glance seems to have no connection. Says the Ramah, imansu lecha lishtos. Let's say the person is forced to eat. Says the Ramah, even though you're getting enjoyment, avagav v'nena, no bracha. Hoyel v'nenes alav. If they force you to eat, you don't have to make a bracha. That's what it says in the Ramah. The question is, why is the Ramah over here connected to our sugya? What does the Ramah have to do with our sugya, the sugya of a person that has medicine that has a good taste? So the implication, l'chayra, is clear. It seems to be that what's the pshat in the Ramah? The side of making a bracha is hakaras hatoiv. A person has to make a bracha because he has hakaras hatoiv to the helik of Hashefer, the Eibishter. So the Rabbanim told him to make a bracha, but that's only if he appreciates it. If he's forced and he has no appreciation for it, so then he won't make a bracha. Right? The Mishnah Berurah says that a person that eats on that, the Shulchan Aruch, says that if a person eats to get better, so that perhaps that one could have thought is a form of forcing. I don't really want to eat. I'm taking this medicine, not because I want to eat. I'm forced to eat because I'm not well. So one could have thought it's the same as what it says in the Ramah. The Ramah says that when you're forced to eat, so then you don't make a bracha, because how could you have a karsa toiv on something you don't want to do? So I would have thought, so when I'm sick, it's the same thing. Why should I make a bracha? I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be sick. So I don't want to have this medicine. I'd rather not be sick. That, the chiddush of the Ramah, the chiddush of the Shulchan Aruch, is that the Shulchan Aruch is saying that the saif, right? Yednana, and in our case over here, it's something that the matziv you might not want. The situation of being sick you might not want. But there's no question that you want the hana of the medicine, because even though you don't want to be sick, you don't want the matziv. That's clear, right? But you're glad that once the matziv does exist, right? You're glad that this medicine is what's going to make you better, and you're glad that it should have a good taste. So therefore, it's not doing it to the case of the Ramah. The Ramah is talking about a case of where they're forcing you to eat. I don't want to eat. So when they're forcing me to eat, I don't want this entire event. I'm happy that I wish that the food wouldn't be here. Mashen came when a person is sick. So then in that situation, the matziv is of such that he's sick. And therefore, saif, he wants the food to go down. Right? He wants the food to go down. That's the chiluk. When you want the food to go down, you make a bracha. What's the Ramah talking about? Well, you don't even want the food to go down. So that's why the Ramah's over here, and that seems to be the case. And therefore, it would seem to be that on medicine, I want this medicine to go down, I want the food to go down, and l'chayra, you'd have to thank the Heilig of Hashefer for this medicine. The question is there any way to be machalik? That's very interesting. The Shulchan Aruch is discussing a case not like our case. Our case is that we're discussing that today they make a medicine, the medicine itself is the refuah, is whatever the refuah is, the powder, whatever, the chemicals that they're putting in. And then afterward, the taste that's good is not the medicine. They add all types of different glycerin, sugars, whatnot, to make it taste good. That's a totally different case than the case that Chazal were discussing. The case that Chazal were discussing was when you have a situation of where the actual medicine that they were taking in those days, it was some type of a herb, a spice, I don't know what, some type of a vegetable, and that itself had a good taste. And that, if it has a good taste, you have to make a bracha. Our case is different. Now, not every chilik is machalik, but that's the chilik. Our case is talking about today in the year 2022, Tavshin Pei Gimel, what we're discussing is a medicine that the etzim medicine doesn't have a good taste. They put something in it to make it bearable, because some of us remember the medicine from 50 years ago at Bayside, right? As I get grayer and grayer. Some of us remember the medicine from 50 years ago and the cod liver oil and all the other stuff that tasted geferlich. So today, instead of taking that geferlich hasachen, they put inside of it all types of goodies that makes it bearable. That's the shaila. Is that different than the case that the Shulchan Aruch is talking about? That's the shaila. So the Meister, what would be the chilik? What would be the chilik? So maybe you could be mechalik. Let's say a person eats something, like for example, he has cornflakes for breakfast, and the cornflakes are very priadama. And, or, there are two types of cornflakes. We'll learn that in Hilchos Brachos. But let's say it's a type that's a very priadama. It's a corn that everything has been sucked out of it, and the bracha is a very priadama on it. So now he has the milk. Does he make a bracha on the milk? So everyone knows, of course not, because you make a bracha on the ikar and you point to the tafel, and that's the klal gadol to Mishnah and Brachos and Daf Mem Daled. You make a bracha on the ikar and you point to the tafel. Oh, so now we can ponder. Rabbi say, let's contemplate. When a person has medicine, so what's the ikar and what's the tafel? So let's see. When a person's taking medicine, is he so interested in the good taste? Of course not. The ikar, of course, is the medicine. That's why he's taking the medicine. Which is, he didn't have to take the medicine. The only reason he's taking the medicine is because of the medicine, because of the chemicals that are going to make it better. So what's the ikar? The medicine. What's the tafel? The tafel is the taste. They put the taste in there in order that, but if you ask him, why are you taking this? There's no question in the world. The only reason he's eating this is for the medicine. So maybe one could come along and say, a svar of ikar b'tafel. Kimoi, that the halacha is that I make a bracha on the ikar, and that pat is the tafel. Oh, so maybe that's only at kama, that the ikar requires the bracha. But let's say I have a scenario that the ikar does not require bracha, because that's pashut, that these powders, chemicals, whatever it is that's doing the actual refuah, that certainly doesn't make a bracha. That's something that has no taste. That's something that has a bad taste, a bitter taste. So there's no question on that. He doesn't make a bracha. So now on the delicious glycerin that they put in, it's true, it's delicious, but that should be the tafel. So why don't we say that on a tafel you don't make a bracha? Oh, so that would be the first scenario that we can think of, that perhaps on medicine you don't make a bracha, because since it's a tafel to the medicine, we know that you never make a bracha on the tafel. But this is really Tali in the very famous Shaila. I said that in Mitzvah Shem, we're going to learn the Sugya and Reshut base. That Mishnah, the Mishnah says that when a person has an ikar and a tafel, he makes a bracha on the ikar. Upoiter is a tafel. Klet achreinim, the Chazanish, Moshe. What's the longest? Make a bracha on the ikar and poiter the tafel. Is it the longest that a tafel davnishkin bracha? A tafel doesn't need a bracha. The Heilige Bashefer requires a bracha only on an ikar. That's where Takanat's Chazal was. On something that's an ikar, that's you have to show a praise. When something's a tafel, you don't need to. It's not important enough to warrant the praise. Okay. Other unknowns that we get that we don't make a bracha on, it's something that doesn't necessarily warrant the praise. Why wouldn't it warrant the praise? Because it's not important. Lefi that, you make a bracha on the tafel. Oh, thank you. You make a bracha on the tafel. I'm just plugging in, Rabbi says, so that you don't lose me. Well, thank you so much. Let's take that out. Thank you so much. Hold up. God bless you. What you do? Look, second. Sorry, Rabbi say. Second. That's okay. Sorry, Rabbi say. You know what I'll do? Let's see, I must plug it in. I have the option. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, is everybody hear me? Everybody say, we're back in business.
Yes.
So, yesh lachkor. What's the hesper that when I have the milk in the cornflakes, I don't make a bracha on the milk? Is it the pshat that the milk is not chashav enough to require a bracha? Because it's a tafel. The Torah, the Chazal, we're only mechayev a bracha on something that has a chashivas, and therefore the flakes are chashiv. Or is it the pshat? No. You make a bracha on the ikr, like the lashon of the Mishnah says, the Chazai Mish, and you pater the tafel. That's the pshat. You make a bracha, the Chazai Mish is in Siman Kaf Ches, not the pshat that the tafel doesn't need a bracha. Of course the tafel needs the bracha. But the bracha on the ikr goes on the tafel. It's very mistaber. Why would this milk not need a bracha? If I drink one drop of milk, it needs a bracha. So now when it's a tafel to something else, it doesn't. So bishlam, if you say, yeah, because it's connected to something else. So the bracha of the ikr goes on the tafel. Rabbi say, this is our shayla. If you learn that a tafel always needs a bracha, but that the bracha on the ikr path is the tafel, so then over here, in our case, the medicine part of this medicine does not have a bracha. So then, of course, you'd have to make a bracha on the tafel. Mashenkin, if you learn that a tafel doesn't require a bracha, so then we're in business. A tafel doesn't require a bracha. So therefore, in our case, the good tasting glycerin wouldn't require a bracha. What's Allah Ma'is on this shayla? So the Chazanish and others, they prove from Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kufayin Zayin that you make a bracha on the ikr, and that has to pater the tafel, but the tafel requires a bracha. How do they prove this? Because over there it's talking about, we know that when a person has a suda, let's say he has a bread suda and whatnot, and he has chicken, etc., things like that. So there, you make a bracha on the bread, and it paters up the chicken, it paters up all the things. The place can talk about, the Shulchan Aruch there talks about what happens if somebody brings from the street some chicken or something like that. You're in the middle of the suda, and someone brings chicken, totally unexpected. Okay, so the Rama says that maybe today it's expected, people bring things you can down today and Tafshin Pei Gimel or whatever. But what is, if that's the case, that it's totally unexpected? Says the Rama, you have to make a bracha. Says the Chazanish, why do you have to make a bracha? It's a tafel to the Suda. Zak the Chazanish, there's no such thing. Everything requires a bracha. Just normally the bracha on the ikr goes on the tafel. So Bishlam, if you knew on it, so then you could say the bracha on the ikr went on the tafel. Let's say you're having a hot dog. Let's say a person's having a hot dog, he eats the hot dog, then after he finishes the hot dog, he sees that, after he finishes preparing the hot dog, he sees, there's no mustard. But what could you do? Sometimes you have to be moist and nefesh, and he decides to eat the hot dog. Then mamish, like a nace, somebody knocks on the door and says to him, we're giving out free mustard. You want? He says, free mustard, but it has a hechsher. He says, yeah, mamish, gewaldig hechsher. It's mamish chassidische shchita omen. He says, look at it, gewaldig. He comes into the house, he says, mamish, matana from the Heilige Bashefer. Could you imagine something? So now he takes it, he squirts it onto his hot dog. Halacha l'maisi, he has to make a shahakal on that mustard. To make a shahakal. He has to make a bracha, in other words, on it. It's a tafel nonetheless, but a tafel requires a bracha. A tafel requires a bracha. Okay, we'll learn in Yitzhak Hashem one day if the bracha on plain mustard is shahakal or adam. Okay, but upon him, he would have to make a bracha. Why would he have to make a bracha? Because the bracha on the ikr paters the tafel. The tafel needs a bracha. But if the tafel didn't get a bracha, like for example, in the case of where you didn't expect to have the tafel, so then you don't have a bracha on the ikr patering the tafel. And therefore, the kai govna, you'd have to make a bracha on the tafel. Oh, so come back to our case, that's not going to be a reason to pater medicine from having a bracha. That's the first thing. What if, let's try maybe something else. Let's try something else. Because as of now, it seems to be medicine requires a bracha. The Shulchan Aruch says, if it's a good tasting medicine, it needs a bracha. But you could be machalik, like I mentioned, that was the actual food. So that food has a good taste, so it requires a bracha. But here, it's not the food, it's the medicine, and it's a taste enabling you. So we tried one mahalach to say that it's a tafel, and a tafel doesn't require bracha. We saw that's incorrect. A tafel definitely requires a bracha. It's just that usually it gets the bracha of the ikr. Now let's try something else. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Yud talks about another case. Shulchan Aruch talks about if a person tastes food, what's the halacha? Do you have to make a bracha? He's just tasting, he's putting in his, now I don't mean tasting like Tayameh on Erev Shabbos, where he has to, sometimes wash a bench and say Ne'ilah and the I mean, he's tasting something to see, does it have salt, and this, that, all of that, what we call tasting in halacha, Tayameh. Tayam, to taste. Matemes. So Shulchan Aruch in Reish Yud says, An interesting chiddush, mat emes does not need a bracha. Because since the person is not doing it on ma'aseh achila, he's not interested in eating, he has a reason why he's doing it. The reason why he's doing it is because he doesn't want the food to be ingested and to get the hana. He has something else. He's not doing a ma'aseh achila. He's trying to find out if this has enough salt, or he's trying to taste if it's too this, too that, if it's too hot for a child. So that's the halacha. Shulchan Aruch says mat emes does not require a bracha. So much so that the Shulchan Aruch and the Poskim, they bring down, even if you were to swallow it, me'ikra din, as long as it's not a revius, as long as it's not enough, if a person swallows something, even if it's a food, he's swallowing it, and he's just doing it just to see if it's enough salt. So the ikra din is, he doesn't make a bracha. The HBrachos says to avoid this, because that's itself the machlekes. So he says, so what should you do? Have kavanah that I want to eat it. And then it's a ma'aseh achila. But I'm just showing you that in theory, in essence, when a person tastes something, and his kavanah is not for a ma'aseh achila. He doesn't want to get it down. Besides, it's not what he's interested in getting it down. It happens to go down, or he even spits it out. He's not interested in that. What he's interested in is a separate thing, a taste, that is not called the ma'aseh achila. It's mat emes, and it doesn't require a bracha. This is why, for example, it's big need in on those lister strips that if they have a hechsher, I don't know what's going on in Chutz La'aretz, but assuming they have a hechsher, we take those things. What's the vart? So some people, they like the taste, they're sucking them and they're drinking them down and devaldik. Okay. Some people, they put them in their mouth for one purpose. He just wants to have good breath. He's not interested in ingesting it. Why doesn't he then just spit it out? He doesn't want to walk around spitting. That's an emes tikkum matemes. That's an emes tikkum matemes. That's a person. It's at least the pashtus is he wouldn't make a bracha. Maybe one day we'll learn the sugya, but the pashtus is that he wouldn't make a bracha on that because he's putting it in. He's not interested in the taste. He just wants the freshness in his mouth. That's not a ma'aseh achila. Taking a piece of plastic, it's not doing a ma'aseh achila. Some of it goes down, but that's not a ma'aseh achila. That's called mat emes. So we could suggest that perhaps it's the same thing when it comes to the medicine. A similar svara. I might say, when I take this medicine, what do I want? I want to get the medicine down, the chemicals down. I'm not really interested in the glycerin and all that good chalila glycerin. I mean kosher glycerin. I'm not interested in that good tasting sugar. I'm interested really in the medicine. I don't really care about that, but I got to get it down. And so that's just enabling me to get it through my throat. But I'm not interested in eating. I'm not getting the sugar taste for the purpose of the eating. It's very doimet to mat emes. Mat emes is that I got to get it down. I don't really care to get it down. What I don't want to do is I don't want to be spitting. So Mamela, if you take it just for an under purpose, not for an eating purpose, so then that is not a ma'aseh achila. So maybe one could come along and say, who I did over here, when it comes to the medicine, I'm not doing it for the purpose of eating. I'm doing it because I push it. I don't want to get it down. I don't want to get it down. What I really want is I want to get the medicine down. So that has to come along with it. Now, you're going to ask, such a beautiful svara. So then, why in Siman Reish Daled Sif Ches does it say if you take good tasting medicine, you have to make a bracha? The answer is there's no question. Over there, I want to get it down. Of course, I want to get it down. I have different reasons why I want to get it down, but I certainly don't want it to come up. I'll give you an example. Let's say, in the case of mat emes, let's say, for example, the person tastes it. He knows now that it has salt. And then afterward, it vomits up. He wouldn't care. He wasn't interested in eating. In our case of medicine, in the times of Chazal, he took a medicine, which was a good tasting medicine. Does he want it to go down? Yes. Would he be upset if it vomits up? Of course he'd be upset. He wants that medicine. So then you have to make a bracha. What's the din in our case? Tavshin Pei Gimel medicine, that when he's taking the medicine, let's think, what's he doing? He wants to get it down. Now, would he be upset if it came up? So that you can declare, look, he would be upset if it came up. But you can declare he wouldn't be upset if the medicine part came up. He would not be upset if the sugar part of the medicine came up. That's a shayla. Can I be mechalik this? In other words, is this the sugya mat emes? Mat emes is clear. If he doesn't want a ma'aseh achila, he's not interested in the ma'aseh achila. He really wants to see what the taste is. And I could have, like I said, my mashal, if it would vomit out, he wouldn't mind. And who I did, fakert. It's not who I did. If by the case of the medicine in Reish Dalet Zif Ches, if when he took it down would vomit up, he'd be very upset. So there it's clear it is a Maisa Achila because he wants it to go down. Our case is something in the middle. Our case is that he wants the medicine to go down, and he would be very upset if it vomited out. But the sugar coating of it, he would certainly not care about that should come out. So is that doimit to emes? Is it not doimit to emes? Is, I would suppose we could say it's somewhat debatable. And the truth is, perhaps maybe it's even noita a little bit that matemis would be a good svara over here. And you know what else? Maybe we could salvage the svara of ikar v'tafel. I mentioned before that we pass in that whenever you make a bracha on the ikar, it patters the tafel, but a tafel requires a bracha, and therefore by us, there's a tafel, and the tafel requires a bracha. So you could say that the ikar is the medicine, the davar that's merapeh, but you certainly have sugar, and the sugar needs a bracha. So l'chayra, it would need a bracha. There's a big chiddush, Rabbi Yisai, from the Avnei Nezer in Siman Lamed Ches. It's an incredible chiddush. The Avnei Nezer in Siman Lamed Ches is talking about a sugya that Mitzvah Shem we're going to learn. Over there, what happens if a person has a piece of cake? So we know that it's a very big fight, and we're going to learn about this in Mitzvah Shem. Let's say I have a piece of cake. I don't mean like a ragala. I mean like a sponge cake or something, where there's not so much flour. So of course he makes a mezainis. But the big question in the halacha is, what's the bracha achrayna? Do we say he had a kazayis of the food, and therefore it's an alamechia? Or do we say, but you don't have a kazayis of flour? On this, it's a world war. The psak of the Shulchan Aruch seems to be you make a bar nefashis. The Mishnah Berurah brings the minhag ha'olam is that people make an alamechia. Ramosha says he's not familiar with such a minhag ha'olam, and you make a bar nefashis. Big fight, alamechia. Or nefashis in a case of where the flour amount that you had was not a kazayis, the minhag ha'olam is to make alamechia. Mishnah Berurah says, Ramosha says he doesn't know from such a minhag ha'olam. Satmar Rebbe said he doesn't know from such a minhag ha'olam, and therefore you make a bar nefashis. Okay, big fight. You have to try to avoid the situation. Says the Avnei Nezer, everybody here is saying either bar nefashis or alamechia. Whoa, why a bar nefashis? Why bar nefashis? Don't we say that over here the flour amount wasn't enough to warrant an alamechia because you don't have a kazayis of flour? Hey, the bracha, right, of course, is mezainis. Because once there's mezainis in it, you make a mezainis. But to make an alamechia, you have to have a kazayis of flour. So what's the tzad that you make a bar nefashis? You don't have enough to make a kazayis, so why bar nefashis? Oh, so we say, well, what do you mean? You have all of this other stuff over here, so it's no worse than eating an apple, right? It's no worse than eating an apple. Says the Avnei Nezer, I found the sheet in Mekubatzis in Brachos that says it's worse. He says, no, the only time you make a bracha on, let's say we have the case of cake, is if you have a kazayis of flour, so you make an alamechia. He says, but over here, the shahakal content, let's say the other things inside the cake, sugar, the eggs, whatever else is in the cake, he said, that's a tuffle. I'll prove to you it's a tuffle. Because what's a bracha on cake? Mezainis, not shahakal. So that's a tuffle. So he says, if that's a tuffle, so then the tuffle doesn't require a bracha. He says, what do you mean the tuffle doesn't require a bracha? Why wouldn't we make a bar nefashis? If it's not getting a bracha, usually, how does it work that the eggs and the sugar in a cake they're getting potted with the alamechia? Because that's tuffle to the food. He says, very nice. That's all if the ikr gets a bracha. Says the Shita, if the ikr doesn't get a bracha, then the tuffle also doesn't get a bracha. When is it that we say that the ikr has to pot to the tuffle? In a scenario when there's an ikr and there's the tuffle, so then we say the bracha on the ikr should pot to the tuffle because there's a bracha on the ikr. It says the Avnei Nezer, what happens if you have a case where the ikr is not getting a bracha because it's not ikr enough, like in our case of an alamechia? So he says, oh, so Mela, it can't be the tuffle is more important than the ikr. Oh, wait a minute. So that sounds like our case of medicine. So if you have the case of medicine, the ikr is not getting a bracha. So if the ikr is not getting a bracha, then you can't say that the tuffle is more important than the ikr, and it does warrant the bracha. Now, as you all realize, Even though the Avnei Nezer goes on to say that the Shulchan Aruch didn't have the Shita, and if he would have had the Shita, he might have paskined like it. That's a Pella, and we obviously paskin not like this Shita, not like this Avnei Nezer. You either make a burn nefashos or an alamichya, could feed a minute. But one could hear a svara and say, that's all because by the flour, it's a type of a food that requires a bracha. And since it's a type of food that requires a bracha, so therefore, avada, even in this case where it's not enough to require a bracha, we're not going to say now that the tuffle doesn't require a bracha, because you're dealing with two foods that require a bracha. If I say, what if I have a food that is a food and it's tuffle to an ikr that doesn't even require a bracha? So maybe now the Avnei Nezer svara is correct. So where are we holding, Rabbi Isai? We have many reasons to believe that our case is not doimah to the case of Shulchan Aruch and Reish Dalet Siv Ches. Once again, we're talking about medicine. That it's not that the etzim medicine tastes good; it's that they're putting something in to make it edible. One svara that we could say is that it's a tuffle. The thing that's going in there, this good tasting stuff, is a tuffle. So maybe. Usually, yes, you make a bracha on the ikr, the pot of the tuffle. That's if the ikr is something that warrants a bracha. But if the ikr is something that doesn't even warrant the bracha, so there may be such a thing. It certainly can't be better than the ikr. It's one svar. If you don't like that svar, there's another svar of matemis. Maybe over here, I'm not eating this in order to get it down because I want the sugar down there. I wouldn't get the svar to spit it up. So that's not a ma'aseh achila. That's eating for a different reason. And therefore, ein chanami in the case of Shulchan Aruch, avada you have to make a bracha because there you want it down and you don't want it to come up. But in our case, you wouldn't mind at all if it didn't go down. And if it would come back up. You just need to get it down. So maybe that doesn't have a shame of a ma'aseh achila. And these are the svaras that you could dan of why medicine would not require a bracha. So now, what's halacha l'maaseh? Those are the svaras that I dan. You look in the Poskim, it's like a whole different world over here. Very interesting. You look in Rosh Shlomo Zalman. Rosh Shlomo Zalman over here, it's actually in a few places that Rosh Shlomo Zalman is quoted. Rosh Shlomo Zalman is quoted in many, many different svarim. I brought the oilam in the Shmir Shabbos is Rosh Shlomo Zalman. I found afterward that in the Sefer Pischei Halacha on page 68, Rosh Shlomo Zalman is quoted. In many, many places, Rosh Shlomo Zalman is quoted. And Rosh Shlomo Zalman was asked, you make a bracha on good tasting medicine, children's medicine that tastes good. Rosh Shlomo Zalman said no. He didn't say this as far as I'm saying. He didn't say Altzmat Emes, perhaps in other places, maybe, yeah. He didn't say Altz Ikr V'Tafel, that it's a tuffle and a tuffle doesn't require a bracha if the Ikr doesn't even warrant a bracha. He says, medicine, what's a shayla b'chal? Is there anybody that goes in, let's say you'd be hungry, and there's nothing in the house. What would you do? Let's say you're thirsty and there's nothing in the house. Belay sprayer. Would you go upstairs, into the medicine cabinet and take out some medicine and take a swig? Of course not. So then that shows that it's not food. If you would never in a million years eat this, so then it's not food. Says Rosh Shlomo Zalman, if it's not food, so then there was no takonas brachos on it. Unbelievable chiddush from Rosh Shlomo Zalman. It says the Chazal made a takana on food. What was the takana on food? The takana was that if you have something that you would eat, you have to make a bracha. If it's a non-food, what convey of something's a non-food? Something's convey a non-food. If you'd be thirsty, you would still never in a million years drink it. You would figure it yourself out. You would go to the neighbor, you would do something else, you never in a million years drink it. What's the case of Shulchan Aruch? Says Rosh Hashanah is not fair. Shulchan Aruch is talking about food. He's talking about food. He's talking about something that people would eat. If they had no, even if they didn't have a choice, they would eat it. So any food that you get a nod, you eat. That's called food. That's Rosh Hashanah. At first, I thought this is a gewaldige chiddush. It's a gewaldige chiddush. I mean, I don't know. So if it has a good taste, I guess Rosh Hashanah is saying, look, when you take sand and you put on it some a good tasting sugar and something, nobody would ever eat it. And that's it. It's not called food. Something that no one would eat is not called food. But then I realized it's even a bigger kasha in Rosh Hashanah. It's not just that it's a chiddush. It's neged the Ramah. The Ramah in Siman Reish Dalet and Sivkot Yud Aleph says kol merkachat. Any merkachat means some type of a dip or something. Any type of dip. She'eina briyim regilim by that healthy people are not ruggled to eat. They only eat it elul refuah. You make a shahakol. Ramah says explicit. Let's say you have a food that people don't eat. Briam don't eat it. Healthy people don't eat it. The only people that eat it are sick people. Says the Rama, make a shackle. Come to gain the Mishabura, and he brings down, no, you don't make a shackle, you make the bracha royas. If it's an eight, you make an eight. If it's a dama, you make a dama. He brings a world war on this. But upon him, it says in the version of the Rama that if you have food that healthy people don't eat, it does require bracha. So how could Rosh Shlomo Zalman say that if you have medicine, since it's not a food, forget my stars, forget my temes, it's not food because people don't eat it. But we see the version of the Rama. If you have food that people don't eat, only sick people, you do make a shackle. So how could you answer such a kasha? Is it a kasha? How can you answer such a kasha? Rosh Shlomo Zalman, Rabbi say. How could you answer such a kasha? So the truth is, under Ramah, the kasha is not such a gefährliche kasha. Because under Ramah lane, look at the lashon of the Ramah. Ramah says, Kol merkachas she'ein.
We put up the Ramah and Sifyud Beis.
Reish Adalid, Sifkatim Yud Aleph. Look at the lashon of the Ramah. The Ramah's lashon is, Kol merkachas she'ein abriyim regilim b'ay. You could have answered, perhaps, to answer up the Halakha Ramah. Excuse me, the Halakha Shlomo Zalman. You could have answered that Shlomo Zalman is saying that if you have something that no one in a million years would eat, so then that's not food. There's no Takanas Brachos. They only made it Takanas Brachos on food. This is not food. Either Ramah says it's an oichel that ain't regilim by. It's totally uncommon that nobody would. But let's say in my scenario, if you had absolutely no choice and there was nothing else in the house, he would eat it because not chalatz, it's food, right? That's how you could have learned the Ramah. Then I don't have a kasha. The problem is that the Ramah is quoting a Ra'ah, if you see, and the Ra'ah, when you look inside the Ra'ah says the words "ein derech klal oichle." Nobody eats it ever. So that sounds like the same thing. How could they kach that the Sefer Pekudas Eliezer, it's on the Ra'ah, he says that maybe there's no machlekes. Remember, we said there was a machlekes if you make a shahakol on this thing, or if you make the bracha haroi, adam eitz. So he says maybe there's a machlekes. The Ra'ah itself is talking about that it's something that no one ever eats at all, and then you'll make a shahakol. But mashenker, if something they'll eat, 90% of the time they won't eat it. So then you'll make the bracha haroi. But no matter how you cut it, Rabbi Yisrael, it seems to be barer that if you have something that no one eats, you still would make at least a shahakol. So how can Rosh Shlomo Zalman say not like that? And this Rabbi say it's a major chiddush. It's a meritic chiddush. That's why, l'chayra. This is a major chiddush of the Goyim Rosh Shlomo Zalman. Excuse me. And I would have thought that perhaps that would not be enough of a reason to not make a bracha. But Shlomo Zalman is Shlomo Zalman. I guess you're gonna have to learn that there's still a chilik, and the chilik is going to be that if you have a food that nobody eats, and nobody eats it. But in my scenario, if there would be no other choice, they would. Mashenke, our case of medicine is never in a million years anyone would eat it. So maybe it doesn't have a shame of food, and therefore there's no bracha. Plus, you have two other svaras that we mentioned. Excuse me.
The Ramah says regilin. The Ramah says regilin.
Ramah says regilin, and Ramah is l'chayra answerable for Shlomo Zalman. In other words, it's regilim, and regilim means that 90% of the time, but 10% you would. Our case is 100%. The problem is the lashon of the Ra'ah. So the Ra'ah says, when the Ra'ah, who the Ramah is quoting, he says, "Ein regilim klal oichle." So we could learn, maybe the Ramah is passing not like the Ra'ah. It's a little bit hard to believe because he's coming from there, but okay, maybe. And then it would be great. Shlomo Zalman will say, yeah, that's why the Ramah went out of his way and changed the pshat in the Ra'ah. That's why Itaka went out of his way to change the pshat in the Ra'ah. Hagufa. Because if it would be no one ate it at all, maybe there'd be no bracha. I mentioned before that the Pekudas Eliezer says not like that. He says, no, the Ra'ah is saying no one eats it, therefore Taka Yel Shako. And the other Achrayim that they're going to learn that 90% of the time you don't eat it, 10% you do, that's enough to warrant its bracha. Okay, if you go like that, then if you have something that 100% of the time you don't eat, then you would still make a shackle. Which Shlomo Zalman Kanir is going to learn not like that, or Shlomo Zalman will learn, like I just mentioned. Perhaps Shlomo Zalman is going to learn that when you have something that taka no one eats, but if push would come to shove, you would eat it. That's the case of the Ramah. That's the case of the Ra'ah. Chicken is a medicine. It's not a food. It's not something that anybody considers food. There's a reason you leave it in the medicine cabinet. It's a reason that it's no shaykhs. So now we have so far 3 svaras why on medicine that's a good taste you would not make a bracha. One is because not food. One is because it's no different than matemis. And one is maybe because it's a tuffle. What halacha l'maisa on this very shver shayla? I'm only seeing the page. Everyone still sees me, I hope. Is that correct?
What's an example of that food? It's not medicine, but no one eats. What's an example of such a food that no one eats, but a mole somehow they can?
So I don't know. I do know what it says in the Ra'ah. The Ra'ah says, does everybody see me, Derek Agav?
What are we looking at?
No, see me. You see me? Or because I'm not seeing you.
Yes, we see you.
Okay. So I like this, Rabbi saying. What would be an example? If you look at the Ra'ah, you know what the Ra'ah's examples of a food that no one eats? It's talking over there about a farina, that normally when you eat the farina, you eat it in a more thicky type of a form. It's a little bit more like thick and whatnot. And that when the person is a chayla, he waters it down in a way that nobody would ever eat it. It's like it's totally not the way, but that I hear Rabbi Isai, maybe that would be good for a Shlomo Zalman, because then you could say that Avada, it's still called food though. It's still food nonetheless. Mashenkein, it's a food content. You just watered it in a way where nobody would eat it unless he's sick. Mashenkein, when you're dealing with medicine, nobody would eat it. It's not called oichel. So that's mistama how Shlomo Zalman would learn. Is that clear, Rabbi Isai?
Yeah, somebody raised a question about animal food, dog food. You're starving, maybe you'll eat it. It's food.
So that I'd like to talk about a different type, because that's really the beginning of Reish Talid more. The things that are totally ekeldik and things like that. But let's go now to Maisa, Halach Maisa, in this, quite fair shaila. Quite fair shaila. And it's like this. Excuse me. So the truth is that when you look around, it's very interesting. Everyone's talking about what the miniga oilam is pape medicine. I don't know what the miniga oilam is pape medicine, Rabbi saying. I mean, think about it. 50 years ago, nobody made a bracha medicine because it tasted terrible. Okay, what happened? 20 years after that, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, they started making good tasting medicine. So that means that a lady at the chap, when she's giving the child the medicine, that there's a shayla and whatnot. I don't know if there's a big minig oilam on this. I happen to think that the minig in Eretz Yisrael is that they do make a bracha on good tasting medicine, and I happen to think that the minig in Chutz La'aretz is that they don't make a bracha on good tasting medicine. But I'm not sure if that minig is kaveya. So let's try to figure out what's halach l'mais. So the truth is that I saw some svarim they bring down from the Igros Moshe and the Chelik Aleph in the Pei Beis that the Igros Moshe says you make a bracha on good tasting medicine. But anyone who looks inside Ramosha knows Ramosha never ever said anything of the sort. I don't know what Ramosha holds, but there's no Ramosha. Ramosha is just donning on the regular old shaila, what we just discussed right now. We just discussed the shaila of the Ra'ah. The Ra'ah, the Ramah in Reish Talid Aleph. That over there it says that if you have something that people never eat. So there's a machlekes, do you make a shahako or an eitz? It's bracha roy or not? If somebody only eats it for a food and it's something that no one eats, what's the bracha? On that, Ramosha asking the shayla. So he says, we've asked him, he says, yesh lahoiris, taka like the mishabrua, that that you make a very priya eitz on it. Okay, but Ramosha is not talking about our case. Maybe our case is different, we just said. Maybe that's talking about, like we just mentioned, it's something like a shtisa, that it is somewhat edible, meaning you might not eat it, but it's somewhat edible, it's still food. Mashenke is something that nobody in a million years would ever eat. It's not called food. So we don't know what Ramosha would hold. You're going to say, but come on, Ramosha wrote this, and he lived in our world, and he knew today that that's the type of medicine they were asking about. I don't know, Ramosha, everybody knows. That's how Ramosha was. He asked him the Shaila. Ramosha has a whole tshuva where he talks about smoking on Yontif, about, you're allowed to have ribushurim and carrying the cigarettes. Is it a problem carrying more than one cigarette? And Moshe has al-tshuva where he's not there because it's all the cigarettes are usable. Somebody would ask for Moshe, everybody in the world knew Moshe, you can't smoke on Yontif. I'm not going into smoking, but everybody judge against smoking yet. So what happened? The answer is very simple. Moshe was answering the Shiloh that they asked him. He wasn't asking him, do you hold your allowed to smoke on Yom Tov? So I'm not sure if for Moshe is right, but Rabbi Yashiv, it's Yadua, and I heard from Rabbi Yashiv, and it's brought down in many different forms, including HaRav, which is Rabbi Yashiv on Brachos. Rabbi Yashiv held that on medicine that has a good taste, you make a bracha. He said, it's manenu, yeshnam trufis, vitamins, etc., that they put in a good taste. And he says, it tastes great. Yesh be'em tamatok, chayiv levarich. Like Gora Mea Nigroin, it's no different than a Nigron. The Chotshani, that's what Nissen Karelitz, is brought in a few places. In one of the Alip de Hilchos brings him in the 34th journal. It is brought down that you do make a bracha. The Chaim Kanievsky, in many of their Chaim Kanievsky svarim, the Shelos Rav, a lot of the Chuvas, a lot of the Chaim would answer back people that would write to him that you do make a bracha if it's a good tasting medicine. Rosh Zalman Kedua held not like this.
So now Lamaisa for us, why isn't it a Sveika the Dina and a Safik Brachos Lahakol?
So I agree with that. It's a Sveika the Dina. Shalom Zaman is certainly enough, and all these svars are enough to make it a Sveika the Dina. So what I tell my children to do is to pater it. Well, you have to try to pater it. You have to try to take a piece of salt or something before you go into the bathroom to take the medicine, and you have to try to pater it. If a person says he doesn't want to pater it, I can't say he's doing wrong. They'll do like Rosh Zalman, but certainly we see that it's quite the big shayla. Certainly see that it's quite a big shayla. Now, it is, my understanding, I'm now over time. The question is the item want to go for 5 more minutes? Because there was one more thing I want to say. If not, you can either do it next time or...
Yes, we can do it, please.
5 more minutes. So then I'll talk fast and I won't answer any questions. What I wanted to discuss was one last shayla based on the above. Based on this Ramah. Once we have the Ramah, it's a very important thing. I'll try to do it quickly. The shayla is the Ramah over here says Allah and Sifches, that if a person is forced, so then he doesn't make a bracha. The understanding of why when you're forced to eat, you don't make a bracha is because you can't give a bracha to the Eilik of Hashefer on something that you're not interested in. There's obviously no akar seta. The shayla is like this. Shayla is, what happens if I force a child to eat? I don't mean take him and tie him up. I mean, you tell him, Yingol, you're not coming with the family to such and such, or you're not this or that, or you're not leaving this table until you finish your broccoli, or your spinach, or whatever it is that we were being forced. So does the child make a bracha? Does the child make a bracha? It would seem to be in the first Ramah that the child doesn't make a bracha. I was asked this shayla from a child. He didn't know the Ramah in Simon Reish. He said, how can I make a bracha when I'm not interested in eating this food and I wish the food didn't exist? That was bizarre loshin. If said this child was mekaven to the Heilig Ramah in Simon Reish Tzivchet, Ramah is in the first. If they force you to eat, you can't make a bracha because how can you make a bracha? You wish it wasn't there. But Chayra, the Taz asks the stira. The Taz says in Sif Tez is a direct stira to the Ramah. In Sif Tez it says, let's say a person is sick and he has to eat nevelis, trefis. So Shulchan Aruch says, Alchol Michael, Nevarach Alav, you have to make a bracha. You have to make a bracha. And the Taz asks, what's going on over here? When it was forced to eat, I have to make no bracha. When I'm eating because I'm in a sakonis nefashis chalila, I have to eat nevelis and trefis. So then I do make a bracha? Why? I'm also being forced. I wish I didn't have to eat these nevelis and trefis. I wish I wasn't in this situation. The Taz says it's a stira. What's the answer to the Taz? So Rav Chanan in Ksuvis says a very geschmack of word. Rav Chanan on the famous sugya of Esther Karka Oilam explains there's a very big chilik between 2 types of oinus. There's one oinus that Rav Chanan explains is oinus on the mice, and then there's an oinus on the matzah. Some of us remember this from Yeshiva. What was the case, Rabbi Isaac? Esther Amalka had to go to Achashverosh. She always had to go to Achashverosh. So what's the difference? She used to have to go to Achashverosh, and she was forced. She didn't want to go, but that's called oinus. Now Mordechai tells her, you have to go. And she says, okay, now I'll go willingly. What willingly? What willingly? This is also oinus. She doesn't want to go to Achashverosh. She's going for Klal Yisrael. She doesn't want to go. But she says, kasher avadati avadati. She says, excuse me. She says, kasher avadati avadati. I wish I didn't have to go, but I'm going to go. And I'm going to now become usher to Why is she becoming also? She's still an oinus. Explains Rav Chanan Hazeh. One is she's oinus on the maisa, and one she's oinus on the matzah. When she's going to Achashverosh, totally unwillingly, normally, that was the maisa. That's not called her maisa bichlal. That's a total oinus. She's not us. Mash Ein came, says Rav Chanan, now she's going to Achashverosh. She wishes she wasn't in the matzah, but she wants to go. And I'll bring it out with a mashal. If I say, in the last year, let's say she would have heard Achashverosh had a heart attack. She would daven that he dies. Halavai, get rid of this Achashverosh. But let's say tonight, when Mordechai tells her, you got to go. She has to go. Why does she have to go? Because what could you do? The Klal Yisrael, but Dafun is trying, you have to go for Klal Yisrael. But let's say she hears right before she goes into Achashverosh that he just had a heart attack. She would take out Tilim. She would take out all of the ladies that were the Gabayim, and they would all sit down and say Tilim that Achashverosh should live. You know why? Because she needed Achashverosh to live to cancel the decree of the wicked Haman. So beside, that's the difference. Says Rav Chanan, you have sometimes ayinus, which is on the Maisa, that's not you at all. Then there's a matziv, there's a situation. You wish the situation wasn't here, but once the situation is here, then that's what you want. Oh, so that's the chilek. When it comes to neveils and treifis, that the person's sick, yes, they wish they weren't sick. But now that they're sick, they dive into Hashem that he has Baruch Hashem, there's neveils and treifis, because otherwise they wouldn't get better. Mash ain't came in the case where they're forcing it down my throat. I don't want it, the chlal. I don't want it. I dive into Hashem, it wouldn't be here. So on that, you don't make a bracha. That's the chilek. But Zoi, come to our Shaila. Now Shaila, Chaya, the child says, I don't want it. I wish it wasn't here. And how can I make a bracha? How can I make a bracha? I wish it wasn't here. How can I thank the Elohim Hashem? I wish not the matzah wasn't here. I wish the food wasn't here. So Chayr Lefi this, it should come out that you would not make a bracha. And that I don't know. I don't think that was not the minig ha'olam in my house. That's for sure not. So I looked around to see, and I saw in Sefer Shari Bracha, he brings down Rosh Shlomo Zalman in Perek Gimel and Eitzchof Aleph. In the Zaysa Bracha, I saw in the different books, they bring down that they say like this. They say that since the child lemaises nene v'saveya, in the end of the day, the child does get a benefit from it, so therefore he makes a bracha. I saw another sefer, it says, since the child lemaisa, when he's older, he would have to make a bracha on it, therefore he makes a bracha. Manoimar, manadaber, manstadak. I don't understand this. I don't understand this. What do you mean? Rabbi say, when he's older, if he'd be forced, he wouldn't make a bracha. So that I totally don't understand. And if he's safe, he's getting a benefit. Rabbi say in Sivches, who says that the case in Sivches wasn't the case of where he was hungry and they're shoving it down his throat and he's getting benefit? It doesn't say anything of the sort. It's in the Shulchan Aruch, it doesn't differentiate between if he's getting a benefit. So what's the difference? It's the exact same thing. In both cases, who says the case in Sivches was a case of where he's not hungry? Maybe the case is where he's hungry, but he doesn't want to eat. Leave me alone. I'm not interested in eating. So Chaya, it should come out that he wouldn't make a bracha. The only thing is, everybody say, if you look at the Mishnah Berurah over here, read his lashon. This will be Messiah. Mishnah Berurah brings over here, I think it was a Beis Meir. Mishnah Berurah brings a Beis Meir and Sivkotin Mem Hey. The way the Mishnah Berurah says it is slightly different than Rav Chanan. Slightly different, and that might be the difference. Mishnah Berurah brings that shiny asam shu oines eina ala achila. Mashiach Nacha achila gufa hu al yidei oines. No, let me read you inside. Excuse me one moment. I want to read you the Beis Meir. Moment. Sorry. Beis Meir says like this. Hachilik pashit. The bansu lo shayach levarich. When they're forcing you, how could you say shevach to the boyrei shebara davar zeh? How could you say thank the Heilig Bashefer that this thing, that they made this thing, that he made this thing? I mean, I wish he wouldn't have made this thing. Of course, there's a makom to thank Hashem Yisbarach. Of course, there's a shame. It's ke'ein what we said. But the Beis Meir just gives me a little bit more of a feel. He says, when did the matziv avadi can thank Hashem? But when there's not a matziv and the whole entire action you don't want, so how could you thank Hashem? You don't want the whole action. Maybe you could say that a child doesn't have seichel to know what is good for him. Maybe that's the difference. So maybe he doesn't know what's good for him or not. He wishes the matziv wouldn't be, and he wishes the action wouldn't be. That's true. But perhaps you could say that even though he wishes that the action wouldn't be, that this entire action wouldn't be, but he doesn't know that this is a good action. So maybe the nafkamina would be, let's say you have somebody who's anorexic, I'm saying an extreme case, and you're forcing your deed. Obviously, it's not going to work, but you get my point. So then maybe that would be good for the person. And then even though they don't want to thank Hashem, but that's because they don't have the right das. So then maybe that's the pshat why the child would make a bracha. The nafkamina is, the Cheshkei talks about a case that in the Romanian army, there was someone who did mamish a cardinal sin. A cardinal sin. What was a cardinal sin in the Romanian army? It was, he was only supposed to get one egg and he ate two. So they told him he has a punishment choice. Either he can go 10 days in the slammer for, in the hole or who knows what, in a Romanian cell pit, or he could eat 10 eggs one after the other. So I don't understand the case so much, because once you can have the first egg, you'll have to make a bracha, because he certainly enjoyed the first egg. But the way they asked it was, does he make a bracha? Because he doesn't want to eat 10 eggs. Or do we say no? So what we just said, it's very good. Because Ein Hanami doesn't want the matziv, right? Ein Hanami doesn't want this matziv, but he certainly wants these eggs in the world. Why? Because if he has these eggs in the world, it's going to get him out of the jail cell. So he certainly wants these eggs in the world in order to get him out of this jail cell, because he obviously in a case of where he chose that punishment over the other. So what came out, Halach L'Maisa and everything, Rabbi Yisai, it comes out Halach L'Maisa that if you're taking a medicine that has a good taste, so it seems to be virtual Ganarach, but medicines of 2022 are not the exact same medicines as were in the time of the Shulchan Aruch. So that's a big shaila. Maybe our medicines, number one, the taste is tuffle to the ikr, which is the medicine, which doesn't get a bracha, and is not a type of an item which warrants a bracha. So maybe we could say it's a tuffle that doesn't get a bracha. Alternatively, we could say that it's like mat'emes. Mat'emes is something that I don't want the food to go down. What I want is just a side benefit here too. I don't really want the taste. I just need it to help me get the medicine down. I wouldn't care if it comes up. Third svars, sometimes that nobody would ever eat this, even no matter what the mat was. It's not called food. There's no takana on such a thing. It's not called food. Rav Elyashiv disagreed with all these svars. One could hear it. The Ramah himself is debatable. The Ramah is talking about a food which is nobody eats, and the Ramah seems to say you make a bracha. Now we gave different roots in. Maybe it's a type of food that's still a food. It's just that it's prepared in a way that no one would eat it, but that's not going to our case, that no one would ever eat it. So therefore, maybe there's no bracha b'chlal. We saw Rav Moshe is not a raya to our shaila in the slightest, because Rav Moshe is talking about that case over there. There are could be Rav Moshe. We agree to Shlomo Zalman. We don't know. Chaim agreed to Rav Elyashiv. It's at least a suffix, and therefore you should try to pater it. Tell the children to pater it. When it comes to forcing you don't make a bracha. So Shmak Echilik of Rav Chanan. And forcing you don't make a bracha. That's if I'm forced on the Maisa, but if the situation I do want in this situation to have that nevela. In this situation, I want a chashverish alive. Therefore, she's called beratzin to a certain extent. But the question is, when a child is being forced, maybe we could say he doesn't have any das, and therefore, and Hanami doesn't want this food, and he realizes he wishes it didn't exist, but he has no seichel. He doesn't understand what's good for him. So therefore, the chayra would have to make a bracha. What's the next figure?
First of all, did the Rav make a bracha on the water that you drank?
So I gotta potted it with salt, because at the beginning of the year I wasn't thirsty, and I need to constantly drink to get down my throat issue. So I potted it with salt right before the year.
You took salt before you made a bracha.
Yeah, and even though there's another eighth of sugar. But sugar is all shaila in the place. If it's adama or if it's an eitz, it's shako. So I decided salt is pasha to make a shako. So why should I use sugar when I can use salt?
So the Rav carries around salt. Rav carries around salt with him for all the shiurim. Is that what you do?
One pocket has salt. One pocket has bizli for the mezayna shaila at the end of the meal. There's a pocket over here with jelly beans. The other pocket, right, is what are you going to do if you have a shaila? Everything's going over here. I call yeshli call.
A special belt for all the mitzvahs. Okay,
All right.
Yasher Koyach, thank you very much. Your throat should get better. Thanks to Eileen for hanging on here
Thank you for
till
the patience, Rabbi. Sorry, today
ending the
was
beautiful shir. We'll see the Rav Mirz Hashem next week. The topic
what's the
we'll
next circuit?
discuss. You'll have to tell me how we want to proceed. I'll
So we'll
discuss.
talk. That's right.
Okay, and Rabbi said we'll have a chazar at 8 o'clock tonight, and Rabbi Deitch 11 and 12 o'clock tomorrow. Everybody have a good day. Okay, carries around salts everywhere.